Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. Welcome to another episode. In episode 250, we review the Detroit Lions 2025 season. We're going to talk about a variety of topics, folks. Of course, we'll discuss what went wrong for the team to miss the playoffs, but we're also going to look at highlights of the season and pivotal moments. We might hand out some awards in this episode. Plus, we'll start to turn the page on what we might expect in 2026, including some major storylines already taking shape after Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes spoke last week, plus a hint of what might be next. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hi, this is Dan Miller, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Ainger, former Michigan High School Coach of the Year. He's also named Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's a scouting and training director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, happy to be talking football with you as usual.
As always, I'm glad to be here, that's for sure.
And we are both glad that this next gentleman's joining us. That is the Sports Writer of the Year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated, the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle, James Cook. Happy to talk football with you too, James.
Good to be here.
All right, just a quick reminder, folks, our show is brought to you by our friends at Roaster Jack Coffee Company out of Traverse City, Michigan. They've been doing this since 1999. What have they been doing? Roasting incredible premium beans from small farms all around the world, fresh to order, just for you. The only thing better than great coffee is great coffee with a discount. Visit roasterjack.com. Use the code LIONS. They'll get you 20% off your order. Guys, I don't know if you guys have realized this, but I kind of keep track of our episode numbers. If you heard it in the introduction there, guys, we are on episode 250. I guess that's one of those round numbers that kind of signifies a milestone. And so congratulations for, finding enough stuff to talk about, but also big thank you to the listeners for helping us get this far. Because if there weren't any listeners out there, I don't know if we might still be doing this, Coach. What do you think?
Well, I'm sure the three of us would be probably just FaceTiming each other and talking about Lions football, but it's kind of nice to at least have one or two listeners out there listening to what we have to say.
All right. Well, again, folks, thank you for listening. Whether you started in episode 1 or 2, or you started after we started the video episodes last year, we appreciate the listenership and the interaction. The interaction's even extra fun. So thank you for that. And let's talk about the season that was and in some ways was not. No revisionist history, folks. We got to talk about what were our season predictions. I went 12-5, guys. I predicted 12-5. James, what did you have?
I think I had 12-5 as well. So, a whole 3 games off. But I think it's pretty easy to pinpoint those as the 2 Minnesota games and then not getting a split with Green Bay like we thought we would at least get a split with Green Bay. So, plus the Pittsburgh game, they should have totally won.
Yeah, the Minnesota and Pittsburgh. For sure, not that far away. And that's kind of the story of this season. Coach, what was your prediction?
Yeah, I think I went 12-5, said possibly 11-6 because of the schedule. It's funny because I had picked us to lose to Baltimore, and of course then we beat Baltimore, and I'm like, whoa, we might be at 12-5. But anyways, yeah, I just and again, James already pointed out the games that hurt us. We can go on and on. Philadelphia, we can go. I mean, it's crazy how many different things turned sideways for us this year.
Yeah, and a lot of people were still predicting even 13 wins for the Lions. A lot of fans out there and stuff because they came off that 15-win season. We saw a lot of guys coming back, but we knew the schedule was going to be more difficult, and we thought they could be better even with a worse record. Neither of those things did happen. I mean, the worst record happened, but we lost the coordinators. So let's start talking about that. Where did they fall short? James, well, what's the first thing you put together? What's one of the main things that stand out to you? I have a feeling there's a main theme we're all going to hit pretty hard on, but what are you thinking on?
Yeah, well, I mean, the offensive line just wasn't good enough to run the offense that we're used to. Used to seeing with this team. Decker wasn't himself because of injuries. He gutted through it anyway, like a professional does, maybe even more so than most. And same thing with Graham Glasgow at center. I mean, he got thrust into a starting spot at a position that is not his favorite to play, and because of Ragnow's retirement, and had to deal the same thing with injuries through the whole season. But interestingly enough, Decker is 12th in the NFL in total snaps played since 2016, with
Wow.
9,134 plays that he played. Glasgow is in the top 20 as well in that time span with 8,784 snaps played. So
That's incredible because Glasgow was hurt for a bit over in Denver as well, and he's still ranked pretty high up there.
Yeah, the other Lion that's in the top 20 is Jared Goff in that time frame. Most snaps played in the NFL, and former Lion Kevin Zeitler.
Oh, so yeah, well, that's some great information there. And you guys, I mean, the difference, how did they fall short? 2024, the Lions were winning the close games. They were winning games they had no business winning, right? Like that Houston game where they had like 5 turnovers. But 2025, coach, they were losing the close games. And the offensive line and the injuries, I think that's a big part of it. We talk about the back part of the defense. We talk about the loss of coordinators. I think we just have to start. I think the biggest thing is the offensive line. James, you already hit on Decker. We talk about Ragnow retiring and what that did. I mean, going into the season before the Ragnow news, which was obviously before training camp, you were feeling very bullish, very confident about this Lions team. But Brad Holmes even said, people would be surprised by some of the trades they tried to make or moves in the draft when talking about the offensive line. And he said that they made attempts drafting linemen as well. Some of those refer to guys they have taken, and some presumably refer to guys they maybe tried to get or tried to trade for. But coach, ever since Dan Campbell got here, the running game was his focus, no matter how many other pieces they added. And the Lions just could not do that effectively this year. And from there, to me, everything else is a domino. I know there's about 4 different areas that didn't go right, but if the offensive line is right and you can run the football consistently, all those other areas diminish to me. What were you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is it's funny. I was looking at their records: 9 wins, 12 wins, 15 wins, 9 wins. I thought at the worst they dropped back 3 because of that, and that everything was geared about the grit part. Everything was geared apart on the offensive line, being able to run a football, control the game, and set set the table, so how we're going to eat, I mean, and we never got to that situation. And it's funny because after I was thinking about the prediction on the wins, I was doing that from my heart and from a fan standpoint instead of looking at it as a coaching standpoint. And
Yeah.
I should have red flagged the Rags thing to myself immediately and said that is going to be hard to replace. I didn't put myself in that situation. If I was a coach, I put myself in a situation of, oh my God, we had 15 last year. We got a hard route. But we still got Gibbs and we still got Saint and we still got Monty. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us didn't see. And even Campbell and Holmes talked about that a little bit in their conference. We all got fat and sassy. I think that's one of the things because we won 15 the year before with a bunch of injuries. Hey, yeah, Rags left, but we'll move a guy here, we'll move a guy here. We got Sewell, we got Decker, and I think that's part of what happened with this season. I just think I used to tell the kids, quit reading your press clippings, man. You're not any good. You're not any good until finish at Ford Field or finish in the GLAC championship or beat Ferris State for that matter, that fact, which nobody does. But anyway, so I think that was the big thing. And again, I have a bunch of different factors, because people don't understand this, but I want to throw some factors out and, when you guys are ready to explain why we lost these games.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with you, like you said there. Okay, well, Ragnow's gone. We
Yeah.
moved Glasgow over, but Glasgow is not Ragnow. I mean, as great as Glasgow has done at different spots, there's a change. We put a lot of expectations on a rookie and a guy who has started 2 games, and maybe unfair expectations
Mhm.
in that, and maybe we obviously didn't have enough depth at those positions. And then when you hear what Decker went through just to stay on the field, James, it was like you're appreciative and you understand the way it looked all season, where
Mhm.
he did play rather well at times, and there's other times things didn't work. And and then the gelling of the line, I think that was the other thing. We saw that week one in Green Bay. It did get better, but obviously it wasn't what it was last year.
Yeah, I think, losing Ragnow was huge, obviously. I think that Frank Ragnow really spoiled Lions fans for a long time. We just got to used to the fact that, oh, this is just what a center does in the NFL. And to a lesser extent, Dominic Raiola for a long time before that, who was
Yeah.
a pretty good, capable center. So I think we just kind of were like, oh, yeah, this is just what centers do. And, we'll be able to put somebody else in there and they'll do sort of the same thing. And that just didn't happen at all. It wasn't close. And playing basically rookies right next to somebody else playing out of position at center didn't help either. If you have Ragnow at center with the two veterans at tackle and then put rookies in between them, they're going to be fine. But with somebody playing out of position, kind of with Glasgow at center and him and Decker both be dealing with injuries, the rookies looked more like rookies.
Yeah. And
Even Penny Sewell had a few uncharacteristic penalties this year. But even though he was ranked as the best lineman in the entire league by PFF this year with a 95.2 grade for the entire season.
And he
wow.
said he played bad.
Yeah.
He did.
And
Yeah.
any out of all linemen, all positions, he was the highest rated.
And now I'm not putting all this on the offensive line, you guys. And I don't think anybody is. It's not right to. And if you watched enough games, it was a collective group. Everybody made errors throughout this season. It wasn't just the offensive line or, a wide receiver or the quarterback or a running back or the secondary or whatever. Everybody played into this. It was a full, as far as I could tell, it was a full team effort. Uh, I want to bring up Laporta and Brock Wright getting hurt as well. Those guys going down as an extension of the offensive line also hindered what the Lions could do running the ball. And you saw that down the stretch, especially when those two guys were out. The running game got even worse. It was living off explosives through a lot of the year, but then down the line, that dried up as well. And that's where I've got a frustration with coaching because it seemed like, coach, when you don't have the personnel to run what you want to run, you got to find something to run with the personnel that you have. And, so for me, it was okay. If you're going to sign two guys off the street and they can't do what Laporte and Brock Wright can do, then you got to do something different. They had so much talent, and it's like do the 2 second drop, throw it 4 yards down the field or something. And just change it up a little bit and get Monty and Gibbs on at the same time. And so you guys obviously know I was pounding the table for that for about a month and a half. So I think that also played into it, Coach, was some of those adjustments that maybe we didn't make that we've made in the past. And maybe that goes back to what you're talking about, we'll just keep doing it the way we've been doing it and it's going to work.
Yeah, and a couple things on that.
Yeah.
Dan Campbell and his coaching staff are who's in the building, who's in the locker room, who's in the meeting. We have full trust on them because they grind, because they're working their tails off. So, that changing part of it, there's so much to it. And I know exactly what you're saying. There's so much to it. Can you add this tweak? Can you add that tweak? Can this happen? And I think that's one of the things that's the hardest thing to do because you have trust. I think when Dan talked in his press conference about going to be a lot of changes, I think the changes of, dude, if you make two mistakes, if you make three, shame on me, you're gone, or you're not playing anymore. You're not. And I think that's one of the things that happened with that. And I don't know, and I don't want to complain about injuries, with it because last year we won 15 games with it. And as soon as you bring up that, what does everybody say? Well, look at the San Francisco 49ers. But here's the thing I'm gonna put in about that with the San Francisco 49ers. And let's talk about our injuries last year. Who was our defensive coordinator last year with our injuries? Aaron Glenn.
Yep.
How many years has he been in the league? The San Francisco 49ers, who is their defensive coordinator?
Robert
Ex
Saleh right
Rob
now.
Salem, an ex head football coach. The 49ers have two head football coaches, two coaches from the NFL running that team and can make those adjustments. And I'm not saying Dan Campbell can on the offensive side, but on the defensive side. And so you don't have those two guys that have seen Shanahan's seen everything as the guy's incredible. And so I want to and Shep is a new guy was trying, and look at the adjustment he made in the last game, guys.
Huge.
It probably may have took him two or three too late. Look at the adjustments he made in the Washington game.
And the
Okay.
Baltimore game, what
And
they
then
did,
the
that was a
Baltimore game.
perfect attack on the
Yeah.
Ravens.
Yeah. So I mean, so it's there, but the other things didn't come in. So
Yeah.
but I think we go back to, we can say this, that, injuries, that, but it goes back to what we already just said. The middle three guys on the offensive line, we were asking a lot of them, especially with the pressures that Minnesota and I was a D coordinator for 30 years. And what I would do is go, we're attacking those three guys. I'm running double gap blitzes on them. I'm running double shoulders. We used to call it squeeze, and we'd squeeze both shoulders because somebody's gonna make a mistake, and that's what happened. So
Yeah. And so, those were some issues that just didn't work well on the offense. And then the defense, the front seven was healthy most of the year. Aiden Hutchinson, 14 and a half sacks. Al-Quadin Muhammad, double-digit sacks, who didn't get as many snaps early in the season as he got later in the season. But the secondary issues hurt it. It hurt the run game and obviously the pass game. And if I'm not mistaken, the Lions had a top 5 defense at the bye week. But obviously, Terrion Arnold, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, that attrition really factored in, James, as to what the defense could sustain. They had moments of greatness even despite those injuries. We had that week against Tampa Bay, but certain things couldn't be sustained down the long haul.
Yeah, and DJ Reed missed a decent amount of time too.
Yeah.
So when all four of those guys played, their record was 3-1. They only allowed 22 points a game, only allowed less than 300 yards a game. Um, total defense. When one of those guys was out, they were 1-1. The points per game goes up to 27 and a half. The yards per game goes up to 340. When two of them are out, their record was 3-2. So not bad. The points per game was pretty much the same at 27.2, but the yards goes up to almost 370. So like another 30 yards. When three of those guys are out, their record was 1-5.
1-5. I mean, that tells you the value. And they're not just starters, they're very good starters
Mm-hmm.
out of
Yeah,
those four
and the
guys.
points per game was actually 23.8, but part of that is because they only gave up 13 points in that loss to the Eagles game, I think, or 16 points to the Eagles game that was played in the rain. But the yards per game goes up to 380 without those
Yeah, I
guys.
mean, again, with Branch and Kirby, and then with DJ Reed being out, and Arnold was progressing. And again, we know that
Mhm.
they're better with him on the field. So
And they still got pretty decent production from time to time from the guys that came in and started for those guys, just
they
not all the
did.
time.
Yeah, I mean, that depth really was used and was rather effective often, just not consistently across the line. Coach,
Mhm.
defensive coordinator, man,
oof.
weigh in on some of this. What did you see? What did you dissect from the secondary, and how did the secondary impact the front seven? Because all I hear is the front seven was healthy. We couldn't stop the run down, for multiple weeks down the stretch there.
There's a bunch of different things that go into that, and I'll kind of tie in. Um, keys to your victory. Stuff that I used to go through. Turnover margin. Okay, we were +4. Okay, all right, turnover +4. But the Bears were +22.
That's
The Bears,
huge difference.
a lot of those teams up in the upper echelon did not have all the pressures we had, or the teams that are in the playoffs, or nor all the sacks that we had. But the turnover margin was huge. Okay, that was one of them. Defensive rushing, our DVOA was 17th. Guys, our defense rushing was 17th in DVOA, and again, you're going to find different stats. I don't work in that building to come up with the exact numbers on how the Lions come up with, but I picked the better of some of the ones just so that we looked a little bit better. So that was a huge thing. Okay, defense was 19th in the red zone. Okay, defense was 19th in the red zone this year. Okay, and we were ninth in third down defense. Okay, so that was a little bit better. But our red zone from last year, I'm going to go back to the AG thing. Remember how high our red zone was last year? I don't remember
Oh,
where we
it
were
was
finished.
incredible
Yes.
because last year we
Yep.
were seventh in points allowed, even though we were
Yep.
20th in yards allowed.
Right. Right. And so those things defensively, I just knocked those out. If any of those change, or even if they're closer to what they were last year, these are different ball games. But the big one is, and again, the reason I did the offensive line or I did the defense line and the offensive line, because another one of the things is you have to control the line of the scrimmage. And we didn't control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball when it came down to, the rush. And then our O line ranked 16th. I don't want to jump. I know we're talking defense, but, so just on, with the turnover margin, +4 instead of, and again, I have a stat for you later on to talk about being lucky. And so
Well, bring that one up right now,
Okay.
if that works for you.
Well, let me knock these out real quick, just so then the control of the line of scrimmage. We talked about that. Offense and defense efficiency. Offense was 8th in the red zone. Offensively, we were 20th on third down. Guys, we were 20th
third
on
downs really hurt us this
Let's
season.
look at last year's on that. Again, I could have pulled a comparison, but I'm not going to compare last year to this year. That's not it. And then I already talked about, and then I talked about that. Let's talk. I'm going to hit special teams real quick. We were 10th in kickoff return and 23rd in punt return. Again, those are only like 3-4 yard differences between the tops and the bottoms, with the number ones and the number 32s. They're not huge, like, oh my God, we were 20th. We were probably 4 yards off of the leader, 4.5 yards off the leader, but that's that hidden yardage chart. Okay.
Yep.
And then excuse me. I already talked about the in-game, change ups and stuff like that, changing things at halftime to make things different. Look at what the Bears did at halftime compared to what they did against the Packers. Again, that comes from having all those games in your belt. And again, I'm not blaming Shep, but Shep doesn't have them under his belt. Dan Campbell is probably not talking about that because he's trying to figure out why the run game's not working. Because now he has to call the offense. So those are all different plays. And then during the game, we had some situation, using timeouts, clock management, trick plays, when, where, and why. San Francisco, and I'm going to keep bringing San Francisco up because I love watching that team play, as you can tell, because they're a lot like we were last year. But they weren't, anyways, we'll get into that later. So let's talk about and again, I bring this up all the time. You need some luck. Okay.
Totally.
You need some luck. And here's one of the ones I found, which was just unbelievable, which includes the ball bouncing your way. Okay, so here's the thing is that's called drops or interceptions, okay, where we dropped an interception or somebody else didn't drop ours. Drop passes, field goals, extra points, fumble recoveries, okay? We were the third worst in the NFL, okay? Let me give you an example, okay? 24 forced and lost fumbles during the season we had this year. That's 24 where we fumbled the ball, or 24 where the other team fumbled the ball. Okay, you guys got it? 24.
Yeah.
It might be a little higher. I might have missed the game or something. We only recovered 9 of those. Okay.
So out of 24 chances, we were only
24
successful
chances,
9 times.
And the worst was we had 11 fumbles. We only recovered 3 of our own fumbles. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you watch the game last night? Did you watch the games this weekend? That is a huge stat that people don't talk about. That if this, oh man, what if we'd had that? We didn't intercept Lamar Jackson. I think we missed 2 interceptions against Lamar, even though we didn't need those 2 interceptions.
But we missed them.
But how many times did we fumble the ball and the other team got it? How many times? What was the one? I remember what game. I watched every game this weekend, every college game. The one where it bounced up and bounced into the offensive lineman's hands and he ran, for a couple yards, or he fell on it. Yesterday was the same thing. Those were the things that Bears get all the time in these turnovers. That's why the Bears' numbers are so high. If they fumble the ball, they recover their own fumble. Right? If the other team fumbles the ball, they recover their fumble. And so that's the luck part. And of course, I have to throw it in there. Official calls in critical situations. But, so I hope that helps people to realize, now when you start watching a game like tonight's game, you'll watch it and go, oh my God, Pittsburgh fumbled the ball and so recovered it. They're going to lose. That's my thing. And how many times were missed field goals this weekend before halftime did the team lose after that game?
Yeah.
It was 3 out of 4, by the way. So
all right. Well, if you're still with us, let's look at some good things that happened. We'll hit some bad things too, but let's throw a little positive in here for just a moment. And as we do that, I want to throw another positive thing out there. Roaster Jack Coffee Company, folks. They've been doing it for 25 years. They're a sponsor for our show. If you want to get some coffee with a discount, go to roasterjack.com. Use the code Lions. You get 20% off your order. Okay, favorite moments of the season. James, what's one of your favorite moments?
I mean, I've got putting hanging 52 on Chicago and then beating Baltimore the next week. That after they stumbled the first week, but then putting those two games together, and then winning two more against not very good teams. At 4-1, we were feeling really, really good, and and the Lions had to have been too. And maybe like Coach said, maybe they were reading the press clippings or something like that. But even us as fans, we were feeling pretty invincible at that point.
James, I think you're reading my rundown, okay? Because my favorite moments were the Bears game, 52 points on Ben Johnson. I guess you could say the other Bears game might have been a favorite moment too,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we swept Ben Johnson. But then the other one was going into Baltimore, where most everybody was picking against the Lions. They get the win, they win two more, they're 4-1. And like you said, we're like, hey, we might have something going here. So those were my favorites. I do have a fun one later, but those were the big ones. How about you, Coach? What's a favorite of
Well,
yours?
I'm going to go to Baltimore, and because we sacked Lamar Jackson 7 times, because my best friend lives in Baltimore. He's a Lions fan too, but he's turned into a Baltimore fan. And his two sons are fanatic Raven fans. And I argued with them all summer long that we'll see when the game plays that Lamar's a better quarterback and they got better running backs and they got better defense and better, better, better. And when we sacked LeVar 7 times, it was weird, but my text messages were like crickets. I didn't hear anything. Maybe just a little chime here. So, anyways, yeah, it was Baltimore. But again, going off of what you guys just said, because that was that one where we're going to play some more running quarterbacks, and Shep had a great design with the double spy concept. And again, that was the kind of the one that it made us read our press clippings, I think.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna
And
stay on. Go ahead, James.
I was gonna say, the other thing about that little stretch there too is that one of the things that we were, all of us were worried about in the off season was the replacing the coordinators. We all had pretty, we knew who these guys were coming in and everything, but there was still a little bit of trepidation. And, in that four games that they win, they score 52, 38, 34, and 37. And, pretty much instantly, none of us are really caring about John Morton anymore. And then it came to a kind of a screeching halt after that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump back out to the East Coast because that's the other part that was a favorite memory, I guess, and moment was Dan Campbell taking over play calling in DC. We beat the Commanders. Yes, Jaden Daniels had been injured the week before, but the Lions moved to 6-3, and there's that optimism that hey, train's rolling again. Dan's doing this, but of course, it didn't go to where we thought it was going to go. So, yeah. All right. Well, we talked fun. Let's talk not so fun. James, what do you got for your worst moment or moments of the season?
Uh, Brian Branch going down with the Achilles injury against Dallas. A year before that, it was Hutchinson against Dallas. So thank God we do not play the Cowboys next season.
Yeah. All right. Coach, what do you got?
I mean, there are a ton of them, as you know, those injuries part. But I think the biggest one for me was the loss of the Vikings, coming out and losing that first game. I know you guys have talked about, but I think when we lost that, we even mentioned, and I said, is that going to come back to haunt us? A missed field goal, is that going to come back to haunt us? Is extra point, is that going to come? And that's where my coaching thing came in and went, man, this isn't a learning game. This isn't, we came out of it and we lost that game and again, that kind of snowballed us downward, but I think that was my worst part of the whole season.
I'm gonna go with one that started with joy and ended with misery, and that was, Frank Ragnow's coming back. We lose to the Packers. Frank Ragnow's not coming back. Like that 3 day span around Thanksgiving was just crushing because you're like, Ragnow's coming back. If we can somehow steal this game from the Packers, oh, by the way, then St. Brown gets injured in the first quarter. And so, but there were a number of different things, the injury to Branch was huge, right? I mean, that was a big thing. So There were a number of things that just were crushing, and that was one that stuck out to me. So, um, what went wrong? We talked about before. So, what was our biggest miscalculation? And I think we all said it was Frank Ragnow, right? That what his impact alone meant on the offense. Because if he's there at center, then you got Glasgow backing up right guard and left guard. And so, even though he plays right guard better than left guard, he's a backup there, and you've got that much more depth at that whole offensive line. So that's my biggest miscalculation is Ragnow. James?
Yeah, I think coach is gonna. I think he had Ragnow on his list too. Absolutely having him there would have made Ratledge, Frazier, Mahogany, all three of those young guys better. Would have moved Glasgow, like you said, to the bench. And I think with Ragnow in the middle, they would have been one of the better units in the league. Whereas with what they did this season, they were bottom half of the league as far as an offensive line unit. Um, and another thing I guess I would add was that we didn't play well against good defenses.
Right.
Yeah.
The Lions offense against top 10 defenses, 18.7 points. Against bottom 10 defenses, 38.6. So we lit up bad teams and we really struggled against good teams.
Mhm.
Jared Goff stats are not nearly as wild as that
Drastic. Yeah.
and nearly as drastic as that, but the offense as a whole
Yes.
really struggled against really good defenses.
Mhm. And I
Coach,
think
how
that
about
go
you?
and I think that carries into the same thing too with the turnover margin or the luck. How many times did we fumble in those games and did not recover our fumble? How many times did they fumble? And
Mhm.
again, you can go through there and go, yeah, this game we lost because this game, but everything there was always becauses. You guys just said it. And I think that's the calculation of losing Rags and even Zeitler. If Zeitler's there, maybe it's a little better. He plays right. And then again, Glasgow could have been left guard, and we could have brought Mahogany along a little slower. I think Ratledge stepped in. I think Ratledge for a rookie thrown into what he was thrown into with all the things around him was pretty impressive. So that's a positive. But yeah, I totally agree with you guys. It's just it was scary.
All right. Well, let's move to the awards section. Linebacker Jack Campbell, right tackle Penei Sewell, both first team All Pro selections. Wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown and Aiden Hutchinson earned second team All Pros. Who do you have for most improved, James?
Um, for most improved for me, it's Aquadine Muhammad, and that's weird because he's 30 years old, so you wouldn't expect a gigantic improvement like that from a guy. But I mean, he had 11 sacks this season. We saw last year, I think he had like five and a half or something like that, but in much more limited snaps. This year he had 11. And the Lions were one of only three teams in the whole NFL that had two 10-plus sack guys on their team. Incidentally enough, only one of those three made the playoffs.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, all right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. What a nice improvement, whether it happens in year 1, 2, or 8, or whatever it is for him. Good for Al Qadim Muhammad. Coach, what do you have for most improved?
Jack Campbell. Okay, and he's been on that upswing the whole time, you guys. I'm not even. You're gonna continue to climb from rookie to your second year to your third year, which is what he did. But the thing is, when he took over the green dot, okay, from Anzalone, the green dot, he was making all the calls as a third year guy, right? Yep, third year guy,
Yep.
and to be able to still put the stats together and numbers together with what he did is just incredible. I don't know why we traded up for the guy, but anyway, so I guess we know what we're doing there. But that you guys, it's not even the football player; it's the leader, the leadership, and to be able to carry both of those and do what he did, and watch him aligning guys, telling guys where they're supposed to be, and things like that. And you hear from like and watching Anzalone not even bat an eye. Like, okay, he's got the green dot. I'm just gonna play football then. I just think that was so beneficial. And next year, wait till he knows he's the green dot going into the season.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of struggling with this one, and I was debating between Tesla and Jack Campbell, and I just can't deny Jack Campbell. I mean, he was number two in the NFL on defense for tackles, 176. He had 5 sacks, and like you said, Coach, last year you saw growth from him, but he wasn't ready for the green dot. And you saw a different player out this year. You saw leadership growth. Campbell set the stage back in training camp when he said, "This is Jack Campbell's defense."
Yeah.
And Jack Campbell lived up to it. So I got to give it to Jack Campbell as well. Um, okay. Oh, James, you have an honorable mention real quick.
Yeah, I do. And a lot of people are going to maybe be surprised about this, but I'm going to say Terry and Arnold
Mhm.
because when he was healthy, the defense was completely different.
Mhm.
People are going to look at the holds and the penalties, and that's all they're going to judge him by. But if you judge the whole defense by when he was on the field and when he was not on the field, the difference was noticeable.
Mhm.
All
Great call.
right.
Hey, you know what? And think about the holds. It's 5 yard penalty. How many splash plays did they have against us when those guys weren't around? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? How many,
Hmm.
I don't remember what the numbers are. I don't know if I wrote them down, but you guys know that. So great call on that, James. I like that one.
All right. The next one is going to be the MVP. And if any of our listeners caught the last episode when I interviewed Matt Derry, he did say the love for Jared Goff is very real from Not the Same Old Lions podcast. And I've got to say, I have a feeling all three of us have Jared Goff as our MVP. But I don't think it's just because we're wearing rose-colored glasses. I'm looking at a guy whose stats are pretty incredible. He was number two in the NFL in touchdowns with 34 to Matthew Stafford's 46. His rating was number three in the NFL, behind only Drake May and Matthew Stafford. And he did not have the offensive lines those other two teams had. Uh, St. Brown, I think, is an honorable mention for the MVP for the Lions because he is what he is. But Jared Goff had to run everything behind that offensive line and do so with a diminished running game this year. And it was still pretty good, but it wasn't what it had been. I'm not putting it on the running backs. I'm putting it on the overall philosophy and lack of ability to gain 3 to 4 yards at a carry. But that changes your quarterback's ability. And so I know I went first with this one. James, what do you want to add? Then I want to head over to Coach on this.
Yeah, and he was pressured a lot. I think he really blew the whole. He's changed the narrative of before that he couldn't play in cold weather. He had changed the narrative before with the Rams that he couldn't win in a big game by winning playoff games in Detroit. And I think now he's changed the narrative that everything has to be perfect on offense for him to be good. The offensive line was far from perfect, and he was still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. He got sacked and was pressured as much as he's ever been in his career, just about. And you just the numbers you just read. I mean, he was in the top three in pretty much every meaningful category for a quarterback outside of rushing the ball.
Yeah. And James, if you want to point out, he had 34 touchdown passes this year. Last year's the only year he's done more than that. His
Mhm.
quarterback rating this year was the second highest of his career, only different than last year. His 8 interceptions, 3 times in his career, he's thrown seven, coach. So he was pretty consistent on all those things, and he threw for more than 4,500 yards for the third season in a row.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, everything he's doing, and he's not going to get it. Nobody's ever going to give him anything. He can't make this throw. He can't roll. He can't do that. All he does is stand in the pocket. If everything isn't perfect, he doesn't complete any passes. Whatever. I mean, it's fun. Peyton, I love Peyton on the Twitter where people were ripping on him, and then he showed the play where golf. I don't know if it was last year, or year before, where he rolled all the way his left through all the way across his body, 45 yards of the back corner for a touchdown. I don't remember who it was. He makes
Khalif
he when he
Raymond.
Yeah, thank you. When he has to make those plays, he makes them. When he has to step, the one where he stepped up, the one where he rolled, the one where he ran for a first down, he's Peyton Manning, he's Tom Brady. Those are, again, oh my God, they're comparing him to Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. I'm comparing him to a quarterback. He's a quarterback. He's a legitimate quarterback. That's what he does. Here's the thing. Here's a good one. 68.6% of his completions. I think you already said it. Dak Prescott, 68.5% of his completions. Matthew Stafford, 66.3%. Matthew Stafford threw for 3 interceptions, I think, in one game and two in another, right? Nobody said that he let his team down. Anyways, let's talk about their offensive line ratings. Matthew Stafford, he's had a phenomenal year, MVP year.
Yeah.
I vote for him right now. God bless, I love it. I hope he does it. He learned everything from Detroit. We know that, and his offensive line rating ranked first in the NFL. Dak Prescott's offensive line ranking is fifth in the NFL. Jared Goff's offensive line ranking is 16th in the NFL, guy, and you know that. So leave him alone. Stop it. Get some go find somebody else to talk about. Talk about Hendon Hooker. What a dumb draft that was, or something. Jesus, get Jared Goff is the man, and we're gonna. I'm not in rose colored, and I'm gonna keep going with him, and I can't wait till he hosts it because I'm keeping receipts too for our for our Twitter accounts.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate that. And James, you and I say wavelength here. I gave honorable mention to St. Brown. You got some numbers you want to add to that honorable mention?
Yeah, I get a lot of things wrong. I will admit that for sure. But
Likewise.
during the fantasy football thing, when we talked about Amon-Ra St. Brown, I told you if you take him in the first round, he'll return first round value. And
Mhm.
he had 117 catches for 1,400 yards,
Yeah.
1,401 and 11 touchdowns. I mean that's a heck of a season for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And he had a few more drops, I guess, than we're used to, of course. He was a human this year in that category, but he was also targeted a league high 37% of the time when facing man coverage. That's an incredible rate in the NFL. And 8 of his 11 touchdowns came when he was covered man to man.
Wow.
Guy, here's one thing I want to ask you: how many plays does he sit out a game?
Not many.
Can
Yeah,
you?
I don't know.
I mean, every time we look at that snap count, has he got any sit outs?
Not
Honestly.
outside of injury.
And the thing is, I look at all these other great receivers, and I'm not talking bad about any of them, but those guys are coming off the field after they catch one pass or two pass throw, they're coming off the field for a rest. That dude's out there every play. So that's the thing is that, and you hear it, and it's Brown and it's Puka and it's those guys. Those guys are off the field. I would love to see what their snap counts are. And then I want to look at, so great call on Sam. I mean, he's unbelievable.
I know it was fun on his podcast. He was like going into that Chicago game. He's like, all right, I want to make sure I definitely get to 1,300 yards. But
Yeah.
then having the first half that he had there, he's like, I want 1,400 yards, and he got it. So,
Yeah.
all right. Biggest surprise of the season, James. What do you got for this one?
I'm going to say Rocky Sin. He came in after those injuries at corner. He played pretty admirably well for a corner, especially of his age. I mean, he's not a young guy for a cornerback, and I didn't expect a whole lot out of him other than some decent veteran depth coming in this year because in the last year or two he looked like he had kind of lost a step. When he played with the Raiders, he looked like he was a little slower than he
Mhm.
had been, but he seemed to get that step back completely this year, and he was a great guy to have around. And pretty much the same can be said for Avonte Maddox. I mean, those guys were two nice guys to have around that I hope are around next season too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about Rock Sin like a year ago, or 2 years ago, and wondering if he would be a guy. And then you're right, though. He journeyed around a little bit and he regained a little something. So, Coach, what do you got for biggest surprise?
Lopez. Lopez. That dude.
Mhm.
And again, Rocky, Maddox, and Lopez, those three guys, three free agents, make sure we get them back next year. And I think the Lions are going to try. I mean, hopefully they're not, hopefully they love it here enough to maybe, take a little pay cut from going out and looking. But all three of those guys are just, they are us. They are the Lions. They have the grit. They want to do what they want to do. And they showed up when they had to. So.
All right. I'm going with Dan Campbell taking over play calling duties halfway through the season. Didn't see that one coming. I remember the media people being surprised, like just everybody's like, Campbell's got glasses on, it's like, what's going on? That was the Washington game that I was at. And it was like, and we're seeing it online. Oh my gosh, Campbell's calling plays down there. So that was my big one. Which leads right into what's next, right? We're going to talk a little bit about some comments Brad Holmes made, but also what's next. We won't get into this too deep, but we got to talk about the offensive coordinator position. We just set it up. John Morton did get let go. Dan Campbell said, or Brad Holmes said, it was they came to the conclusion, so they made the decision, so they went forward with it. Um, Lions were going to bring in David Blau for an interview, former quarterback David Blau. A lot of people were skeptical about that. Well, you don't have to worry about it. He's not coming in anymore. Washington, who blocked him last year from multiple lateral interviews, promoted him to offensive coordinator. So he is staying there. Mike McDaniel is a guy who's been requested, Miami Dolphins former head coach. Since that request, he's gotten multiple head coaching interviews. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And then Jake Peets, the Dolphins passing game coordinator, is also going to get an interview with the Lions.
Mhm.
Coincidentally, the Lions passing game coordinator, David Shaw, got an interview with Tampa Bay for their offensive coordinator position. And Kelvin Shepard is getting an interview for the Dolphins head coaching job. Plus, there's one other guy on the list, T. Martin, right, James?
Yeah, yeah, Ravens quarterback coach.
Great.
He's another guy that's supposed to be coming in for an offensive coordinator interview. And the interesting thing about McDaniel too is that he's interviewing for like 5 jobs. The Lions are the only one that he's considering as an offensive coordinator. The rest of them are head coaching jobs. That kind of
Oh,
tells you how much of a plum job the offensive coordinator for the Lions is and what they can offer.
Mhm.
That he's just like, I'm not going to look at any other offensive coordinator positions.
it is. And let's also keep in mind, like, there's other guys, like you've heard the name Mike Kafka out there.
Yeah.
Well, he's an offensive coordinator right now on a team that doesn't have a head coach. So he's in a holding pattern, right? So some of these guys whose teams might not have a head coach might get let go, and they can't technically interview for a lateral position right now unless asked about it or whatnot. So I'm expecting some more names to emerge. And I think the process is going to take a little bit of time, James.
Oh yeah, it won't sort itself out. You still got teams that are in the playoffs too, and teams that are in the playoffs, it's pretty limited as to how soon and how often, what days you can contact guys for interviews. Like people did with Ben Johnson last year during the playoffs. There's only like it's a very small window that they would allow coordinators who are still in the playoffs to do interviews with other teams. So uh, a lot of that stuff a lot of those dominoes will fall later. It's they're not going to hire Mike McDaniel probably right now. He's going to go through those other head coaching jobs and see whether he wants one of those or what they offer him and stuff. Although keep in mind that he is still being paid head coach money by the Miami Dolphins for several years. So
Yes.
money may not be the biggest thing. It's opportunity for success.
Exactly. And so, like, I speaking with Matt Derry, just talking about Mike Kafka, like that Giants game was pretty darn creative by him with a bunch of guys who most people can't name. And Jameis Winston's catching a touchdown pass. And so, coach, we got to keep this brief on this, but is there a person or just a thing that you're looking for in the offensive coordinator from the Lions next year? Here's my two thoughts quickly is I'm surprised David Shaw didn't get involved a little bit more, or maybe he got involved more than we realize, because I thought that was a potential asset. But I'm looking forward to an offensive coordinator who would actually call the plays, only because I think Dan can do the rest of everything better if he doesn't have to do as much there. But what are you looking for in an offensive coordinator for next year?
Well, definitely somebody's going to fit in the system. He's going to be the same way we are. He's going to do exactly what Dan wants. I mean, that's going to be a big thing. Hopefully, it's a guy with some experience that can add in some of his tweaks, or not even the experience part about being an OC, but the experience part of being on other people's shirt tails as they jump around with different head coaches. Whether it was, he started out as analyst, and then all of a sudden now he's a assistant running back coach, and then he turns into a pass game coordinator, a quarterback coach, things like that. Somebody with a whole ton of knowledge and stuff like that to take some of the pressure off Dan. I think Dan's still going to show him how he wants it done. But if you get somebody with more experience, it will be less of him showing how much he wants it done and letting that guy run with it. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. We all want, oh yeah, we want McDaniel, we want this guy, we want that guy. And again, the carousel of this coaching thing as it falls out, who goes where, who gets pulled from what team to where, because it's a shirt tail business. We saw that with Morton, with Dan and not, they're buddies and thought it was going to work. And so I think it's going to be the guy that can do what he can do with the motions and the different formations and stuff is what Dan wants. Also, don't forget we're looking for a tight end coach, and he took
Yeah.
the Iowa State job, and I saw some pretty good names for that. The guy from the Cardinals, what he did with McBride. I see they're going after some guys there that have turned some of these tight ends into guys that, yeah, McBride's okay. Well, McBride, yeah, he's okay. He had a lot of catches this year, so it'll be good to see how this all works itself out. And who knows, maybe somebody trades for LaFleur to go coach their team, and then things are gonna come unraveled there too. So it's gonna be fun
Yeah.
to watch. I'm not gonna read. I am gonna read every day on it, but I'm not gonna report on it.
Right. All right, James, what about you? Offensive coordinator. What are you looking for? What are you thinking, for the Lions?
I mean, obviously everybody's going to say they want a Ben Johnson clone, but I don't know that there really are Ben Johnson clones out there. And McDaniel is a guy who's very well regarded as an offensive wizard. And with what he did with the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, I think or Tyreek Hill, you think he would be able to kind of maybe do the same things with Jamison Williams, and that they're both so fast at wide receiver that he'd be able to do those kind of things. Um, and with an even better quarterback than Tua in Detroit with Goff. So I would think that the weapons would intrigue him. Obviously, a head coaching job might intrigue him even more. But it's all depends on what he wants. Like I said, he's still getting his full salary from the Dolphins. So money's not necessarily the biggest concern here. It's what he wants. Does he want to be successful as a coordinator? Does he want to go to a franchise that was bad enough that they fired their head coach?
Mhm.
So if it's me, I'm looking at the Lions as thinking, man, this is a place where I can go for a couple years as an offensive coordinator, put it myself, have a really good couple years and a resume, and have my
Mhm.
choice of places to go as a head coach,
Mhm.
rather than have to go to some place that is moving on from somebody because that team was just bad this year.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is you look down the road on that. The Chiefs. That Andy Reid, how much longer is he going to coach? So, but got if and again, is he a perfect fit for this? Is he a perfect fit for this group? Dan's. It's got to be perfect, guys. And Dan's not gonna. If there's a question mark, Dan's gonna move on. I know it. I just see that. You guys, because
Yep.
he wants it perfect.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to keep an eye on, see who the other candidates are, and see who else gets interviews. Like we just said,
Mhm.
Calvin Shepard's getting an interview for a head coaching position down in Miami. All right. One major topic we want to hit on that Brad Holmes reflected on, and it's one that's kind of been gaining some traction for a week or two, and that was a David Montgomery speculation. He was asked point blank, do they expect David Montgomery to be with the team next year? He said, yeah, look, obviously, I know that it was a tough year for him. I'm not going to say that we went into it planning it that way. He handled it like a pro dot dot dot, right? Then he's like, we want to know what the best plan is for him going forward. Is it somewhere else or whatever the case may be? Appreciate what he's done here. If it ends up going the other way, I hope it doesn't because we love him. Yo, this isn't even he's still on the team stuff. This is we love him, but we understand the situation. Uh, James, what are your thoughts when hearing this from General Manager Brad Holmes?
I was really kind of surprised about that, but I'm wondering if maybe they're just thinking with the salary cap crunch that's coming up that they think that he maybe they want to rework his contract or something, and if he's not willing to do that, then maybe they move him or move on from him or something. But he's such a great second running back to have there. Whereas if Jameer Gibbs, God forbid, ever gets hurt, you got a guy who can just step right in and carry the load, and your offense is not really going to suffer from it. I mean, is he the big play guy that Gibbs is? No, no. But he's a guy who can still be the number one running back on a very good offense. And those guys aren't that easy to replace. People think the running backs are easy to replace. I mean, yeah, you can draft them, but the hit rate on running backs is not great, especially after you get past like round one or two.
For sure. Coach, what about you? What were your thoughts on this when you heard this?
Well, a couple things. They're going to do what's right for him because that's what the Lions do. You didn't hear him say he's under contract. He's playing here next year. He's got no choice. And I think that's one of
Right.
the things people don't understand. So that I'm going to go all the positive. I'm going that cup is half full, not half empty. I think the other thing too is they have to go to and sit down with him and tell him, you're going to only get 30% of the carries instead of the 50 or 60, 40 or whatever. I don't know how they're going to do it. I think he's got to, and then the other thing is what's the other fit on another team he's going to do? I see there's a bunch of teams that are saying they'd love to have him, but is he going to be RB1 at those teams? Yeah, he can break, he broke a 75 yarder last year and he had it, what do you have, 170 yards this year, 150 yards this year against, was it the Ravens? I don't remember which one of the games he had a big year. So,
Yeah,
I
Ravens.
think, I think that's the biggest thing. And I think the other thing with Brad is, Dan kept saying, I'm trying to give him the ball. I'm trying to get the ball at all those different press conferences. And I think there was times where he probably came into the office and said, what's going on? I don't, and let's talk about what was the third down rate completion, weren't we? How low were we? And those are reps that are taken away from him. If we'd have a 14 play drive, maybe he's on the field for 5 of those 14, and Gibbs is on for 9. So I think that's what they're going to try to do. And they got to balance the checkbook too. But I think
Yeah.
and they're going to do, I believe, just like a few years ago, who was our running back coach that they let leave and go coach at Washington so he would be near his house, near his
Deuce
home.
Staley over in
Thank you.
Carolina.
Again, you're under contract, dude. Well, you want to go. I don't remember so
Family
I think
related. Yep.
family related.
Mhm.
Thank you. And I think that's the stuff that you got to realize what's going on here. So
Yeah.
I'm positive he's coming back. Well, I'm gonna say I'm positive he's coming back.
It is complicated, folks,
It's
and it
coming.
really is for so many levels. You want to know how good David Montgomery is? He is. Go back and listen to episode 13 of our podcast.
Mhm.
I after that happened, after that signing happened, I got up and did a quick episode for it because he is so good. Like I watched him in Chicago and was always like blown away by how Chicago didn't use him as well as they could have. And Detroit kind of did the same thing this year, you guys. Um, yeah. Am I saying you take, Jahmyr Gibbs off the field? No, not in most cases. Maybe in some cases, but in most, you put them both on the field, or you just have more of a rotation. It's a complex issue. You've got the salary cap to worry about. Can you afford to pay 2 running backs that much money? Like Coach said, you want Dave Montgomery to be happy. He's 28 years old. If he wants to be the featured back, he could probably be the featured back on half the teams in the league, right? Like James said, though, you if you're gearing up for a run at something, if you think you have a shot at the playoffs and beyond, you got to be careful about getting weaker somewhere. And if David Montgomery's not on this team next year, they will be weaker at the running back position. I wrote an article at not the same old lions.com talking about this in more detail. I compare it in some ways, but different, to look back what happened to the Baltimore Ravens in 2000, okay, and 2001. In 2001, they went and got a new quarterback, and they thought they were going back to the playoffs. They made it back to the playoffs, but they didn't make it very far because their star running back never saw the field that season. So they got weaker at a position because they let somebody else go. So check that article out. David Montgomery is everything these Detroit Lions embody.
Mhm.
And like Coach said, hey, you know what? They're going to do right by him. And that might mean having to let him go if that's what he ultimately wants. But I'm hopeful the new offensive coordinator comes in and they work on that offensive line and they have a game plan and they tell him about it. And he says, hey, I want to do it. But like James said, the money wise, I honestly think the best we can hope for, it's a luxury, you guys, to have both of those guys on the team, is one more year. I think the most you're going to get is one more year because of the cost, because you're going to have to pay some other guys. That's my 2 cents. Any reaction?
Yeah, I mean, here's one thing. I mean, David Montgomery is the number two running back on a team with Jahmyr Gibbs, who is probably right now one of the top two or three running backs in the NFL
Yep.
statistically, and over the last 2 years. David Montgomery was the leading rusher on the Lions 6 times this year.
Yeah.
Granted, one of those was when he only had 14 yards.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of salt there,
There
take it
is.
with a grain of salt thing. But he was, so he was involved, not as much as he's been in previous seasons, obviously. But I mean, when you have a guy like Gibbs, you have to take advantage of that as well. I would love to see David Montgomery stay on this team. The duo of them, and I think this offseason, if they address the offensive line through free agency, through the draft, through both, and get Sonic and Knuckles back up to where they were a year ago, David Montgomery will be happy.
Mhm.
For sure. Well, we'll talk about that more as the offseason goes on. If more information comes out, he's on the team right now. I hope it stays that way. He's got 2 more years because of that extension he signed. And so we'll have to see how that goes. All right, we've had a lot of different topics. What are your final thoughts? Coach, to start with you.
Just looking forward to this, off season. See what happens with the OC, see what happens with the tight end, and see how this Montgomery thing starts to work itself out. And it's going to be interesting to see how many guys we lose. And by the way, let me quick shout out. Happy birthday to Sam Laporta. He's 25.
Oh,
Can you believe that? 25 years old, Sam Laporta. He's getting
yeah.
up there. He's getting up there already. I think Indiana's got 4 tight ends older than him.
That's the University of Indiana.
Yes, exactly.
James, how about you? Any final thoughts you got?
The Detroit Lions are not far off from where they were a year ago. The talent on this is still one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. There's going to be churn every year, of course. There's going to be free agents, but the core of this team is still there. And you're going to bring in more free agents next year. You're going to draft guys. Holmes has shown that he is good at doing both. It may not be as flashy as people want sometimes, but that he brings in and puts together a good roster. And, they did the last 2 years they have. It's been decimated by injuries. But you get a little bit healthier maybe next year. You get maybe a couple of those fumbles to bounce in your chest instead of somebody else's. You get maybe not, completely hosed on a couple of calls like at the end of the Chiefs game. Uh, this is a whole different season.
All right. Well, a couple big topics. I think one you hit on is there's going to be turnover. I think we're going to have more turnover this offseason than we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years with the Lions. So there'll be a lot to dissect and see how that goes. And then, Coach, like you and James, I presume, I watched tons of football this weekend. All right. And I got to tell you, watching the NFL playoffs, you guys, in the past, when I would watch the NFL playoffs in the postseason, there are all these teams that were like, oh, I hope the Lions are that good someday. I hope the Lions can be that good. It was so frustrating this weekend because these teams are not much better, if any better, than the Lions. Okay. And so there was like virtually little separation, which tells me, like Campbell said, we hit rock bottom, relatively speaking, which, hey, that is nice. It's okay to be disappointed at 9-8 when you're hoping to get 12 or 13 wins. That's better than being happy at 9-8 when you were expecting 4 or 5 wins. And that tells you where this franchise is right now. And it's going to be an interesting and hopefully very exciting offseason. Keep an eye out for episodes. We will be on the air and giving them to you as things happen. We've been following the NFL calendar and, of course, any big news and breaking events. As we wrap this thing up, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention wide receiver Jamison Williams. Though his stats were very similar to last year, we saw his importance in the offense grow even more this year. We saw more evolution out of the wide receiver, and we expect that to continue into next year as well. He was also named the Week 15 NFLPA Community MVP, which makes him a finalist for the NFLPA's Alan Page Community Award after donating brand new custom coats in downtown Detroit this winter. The awards presented each year during the week of the Super Bowl. I want to say a thank you to our friends at Roaster Jack Coffee Company. They've been roasting incredible beans since '99, and you can check their stuff out at roasterjack.com. If you use the code LIONS, it'll get you 20% off your order. And again, this is episode 250, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please continue to tell your friends and family about the show. You can follow us on social media like Twitter and Instagram, and of course on YouTube for the video version. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reviews. You can check out more content and episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. And until next time, stay gritty, my friend.